What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jeff Needs Sports and Off the Ball Network production. We're back here. We're kind of keeping this thing going. We started a few weeks ago by digging into the college football playoff rankings. I had Mo with me then from Up in Flames. Now it's kind of a ride or die situation to where we're gonna see this thing through the championship for good or bad. So again, I got Mo Murphy from Up in Flames with me, and we're gonna give our Final Four reaction, and we'll talk some transfer portal stuff and try to put this FSU controversy to bed and move on to the actual game. So Mo, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. Got some good sleep. Nothing better than to wake up on a Saturday and be able to do a show with you. Like, that's just perfect.
This is great. Only one college football game today. Shout out to Army versus Navy. We're recording, the morning of that. Great game. It's always awesome. Always love the uniforms. So, Mo, I assume you're go Navy on a day like this. I never even asked you.
Every time. I'm not like huge on the supporting the Navy, but
you still go Navy.
It's college football, and I'm gonna watch it. I watch it every year. I've watched it every year since I was a kid for some reason, because my family has all served Marines, Army, Navy, all that. So there's a little interest and a little bit of trash talk, but yeah, it's definitely go Navy. I definitely can't root for the Army. Even though my sister's in the Army, now that makes it even more.
I've always leaned Navy. We visited Annapolis, years ago. I've actually got more Army veterans in the family, but I don't get too tied up in picking sides because I think it's a cool game, and it always looks. I think they do a great job of putting the game on. We're not here, everyone, to break down Army versus Navy, but I just want to shout out that I think CBS and in the country making it a standalone game really does a great job of showcasing the game. So shout out to Army Navy as we speak. So anyway, we're going to get on. Final Four came out last Sunday. Ton of controversy, some expected stuff. So what we had, I'll go through it. Anybody that's not quite up to date. So Georgia lost last Saturday. So Michigan wound up the number 1 seed. Washington beat Oregon to take the number 2 seed. And then we had 2 huge events. Texas jumped up past Ohio State, past Oregon, past Florida State to take a 3 seed. Texas jumped up to take a 3 seed after whooping Oklahoma State. That's its own question marks. And then the big one was Alabama beats Georgia by 3 on Saturday night in a great game and jumped from 8 to 4. And then as at the same later that night, Florida State defeats Louisville in a kind of an ucky game, but they did win. They finished the season undefeated. Their quarterback's injured, out for the season. Florida State drops out of the top 4, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. And then so it winds up being Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama. Mo, just when you saw it as it was happening, let's kind of go through your emotions of how you watched it transfer. I'll go one by one here. We'll break it down. When you saw Michigan at 1, what'd you think?
Okay, so full transparency, I was actually at work driving around.
Okay.
Delivering everybody's packages in the Dallas area to make sure they get their good old stuff for Christmas. While all this was going on,
we appreciate it.
I happen to have a fan that didn't have.
Mo is basically Santa Claus.
Yeah, basically,
is what he's saying.
In a sense, I was busy being Santa Claus while this was all transpiring. But I was in a van that had no cameras. So what I did get to do is be around my phone, have it playing on my phone. So I did get to kind of keep up with it. Michigan won wasn't a surprise. It was kind of on to the next. When Michigan was 1, I was like, sure. We kind of knew that once Georgia lost, no matter who gets in what, Michigan's just going to automatically move from 2 to 1. It makes the most sense.
And I can't wait to discuss that in a few minutes. But anyway.
Yeah, it was just the easiest thing to do. Yep. It was just they were 2, the number 1 team lost. We don't have to have controversy. I don't think nobody cares that Michigan was 1.
Yeah.
Really, really cares.
And obviously did not care about their game. The Big Ten championship game meant nothing, all that stuff. I totally agree.
Many people watched it. To be honest, you kind of seen the score, but you were watching the Florida State game. Everybody's kind of watching Florida State to lose to see what happens. So Michigan 1 was cool. I expected it. Once Georgia lost, I was like, Michigan will go to number 1. That's cool. Who do they match up with? Is going to be the most
easy enough.
Of that.
So then Washington at 2. Did you get to watch the Washington-Oregon game Friday night?
Yes, I did. Yes,
I thought it was a fun game. I really enjoyed that game. I thought both teams were pretty good. I was impressed with Washington. Everybody telling them they're going to get smashed by Oregon, who everybody was telling us for a month that Oregon was actually the second best team in the country. And then Washington handled their business. Dylan Johnson played like a man possessed. Penix showed up. That team's tough. That team's physical. That team knows who they are and how to win games. I was really impressed. Washington takes a 2 seed. How do you feel about Washington taking 2?
Once again, another move that just makes the most sense. The number 3 team, undefeated. You could have maybe put Washington 1 just because of what they did. Like, I know there's some people that feel like they could have been 1.
No, let's talk about this for a couple minutes because it'll save me some time in the next segment.
I don't care that Washington wasn't 1, but on the sense of what the past few weeks have looked like, you wouldn't have been wrong. You're not wrong if you think Washington should have been number 1, and the committee wouldn't have been wrong for putting them number 1. First off, Michigan beat Iowa. You know what I'm saying? So, big deal. We knew that was going to happen. We knew when Michigan and Ohio State played each other, we knew the winner of that was going to go on to win the Big Ten championship, beat Iowa, and play in the conference or play in the college football playoff. Like, so it wasn't as written for Washington. Like, Washington had to play Washington State. Everybody watched the Apple Cup. Like, it's the last time that the Apple Cup probably is going to be played, really meaningful, especially every year. You watch that game, they struggled. They go into this game, they're 9-point underdogs to a team they've already beat, by the way. Like, they walk into a game on a neutral field, 10-point underdogs to a team that they already beat. And then they handle Oregon. Like, there was really never – every time you thought, like, okay, this is the moment where Bo Nix is going to have his Heisman moment. They're going to take the lead, which they ended up taking the lead, but Washington responded. But, like, there were the moments where you thought Oregon was going to take over. Like, Washington, you let them hang around for too long. Now they're going to take over and the better team's going to win. And that never happened. And so for having arguably outside of Alabama or Georgia, having the toughest conference championship matchup, and you were the one team that played that Saturday or that played that Friday or Saturday, played that weekend that was told you have no chance. You were the one team that got told you have no chance. You end up winning that game. You beat Oregon twice. If everybody's telling me, hey, they're one of the 4 best teams, but this might be the 2nd best team in the country since that Washington loss, then I think you should get that type of credit for basically you've beat what everybody's told us is the 2nd best team in the country twice. Like, you've beat the number 2 team in everybody's eyes that can play with everybody twice.
That's what bothered me about it, because here's, like, just resume-wise, like, full disclosure, everybody knows me and Mo are huge Ohio State fans, but this is a college football show. This is not – it just happens to be that other team is number 1 is why we're talking about this. But when I just look at, like, what they did, like, here's what we had going into it. Michigan had 2 games on their schedule that they had to win. Everybody knew that. No big deal. You know, it wasn't loaded at all up until then. And what I don't like about it, if I'm Washington, here's what I'm saying. Wait a minute. We had to play Oregon early. You know what I mean? We played a tough pack, 12, schedule early. Meanwhile, Michigan gets to kind of coast through their schedule until they get to depends on how good you consider Penn State is, but they're physically good. That's the first time. Week 10 was the first time that Michigan even risked like major injuries playing a team that could match their physicality, as to where Washington had already played Oregon, beat Oregon. Then we heard for 2 months how great Oregon was. So then all of a sudden, Washington plays Oregon again, like you said, after coming off a tough, rivalry game with a great quarterback, by the way, good-looking guy up there in Washington State.
Great guy. Could be.
Man, there's just something about him. Anyway, so and then like you said, they handle their business. But what the committee did was like, nah, it's easier just to move Michigan up. Like, if you just look at it, if you look at the top 25 victories, if you look at just eye test, all the things you look, we're going to talk about Florida State in a minute, but if you're going to punish Florida State for not having a quarterback, then you got to give Penix way more credit than McCarthy. If we're judging quarterbacks, and that's why you can't where you're at in the, like, Washington had every argument to be number 1, but it was just easy to be like, and the only reason they weren't is because they weren't above Michigan before that. That's it. There's no other reason. Michigan got to be number.
There's the other reason why, but
Michigan got to be ranked up there all year, based on we think they're going to beat Ohio State at the end of the year, because they played nobody to earn it. They looked just as clunky against bad teams as everyone else. They thought, they beat Ohio State by 40 yards, 6 points and 40 yards. But what I'm saying is, like, it wasn't a blowout against who everybody said McCord wasn't that good. Again, we're talking about quarterbacks and we're talking about not having quarterbacks. All of a sudden it doesn't matter. And then Washington on the biggest stage, standalone game, everybody said they were going to lose against who we thought was going to win the Heisman going into that game Friday night. Takes care of business, and all they do is say, yeah, you can just stay where you're at. So that's where I'm at on that. So we're going to move on now. Texas at 3. This is the one I think after everybody, it was one of those things where you said it last week. The committee should have put Texas higher if they knew they were going to put them in if they won.
They
So
should have
that
been
was kind of screwed
Ohio
up. Like
State.
there was no reason to be behind Ohio State if you knew you were putting them in if they won. That was
Them
stupid.
or Bama. Like them or Bama. Ohio State at that point should have been 8. And I know it would have. I know punishing Ohio State, like in the immediate eyes of like that Tuesday,
but they could have dropped them back.
Right, but it would have looked crazy. Like the mindset of leaving Ohio State there was like there is a window, like there is a world that Ohio State can get in, and putting them at 8 kind of closes that window. But at the same time, like these teams, my thing was if you knew like you were going to make this impossible jump, you could have made it look less impossible by putting the one team in the top 8 that wasn't playing for the conference championship. You could have put them at 8. I know
you could have solved the controversy. Put Alabama at 6. And all of a sudden now
you could have kept Oregon 5. You know, you could have had Texas 6, Alabama 7. Like I know that only switches them one spot, but that puts them all ahead of Ohio State, which I think you don't even leave as many of the scenarios open for Ohio State to get in, or every scenario that we said, like for Ohio State to get in that would have had to happen was more like you kind of left the window. Like all these scenarios may not even have to happen for us to put Ohio State in. All it takes is for the Texas to really look bad and not look like one of the 4 best teams. So I feel like you should just put Ohio State at 8 only because like it was the outside side of them getting in anyway. So I'd have been cool. Like I understand it. They're the one team in the top 8 that has a chance to get in, but is not playing for a college football playoff. They don't control their destiny. Everybody else does.
Yeah. So we'll get, we're getting real close to getting to the FSU conversation. So Texas, were you surprised at all after seeing what Texas did? Were you surprised at all that they did get into the top 4?
No, I just knew what was going to happen.
You knew what happened then. Okay.
What was going to happen when they got to 3. Then you were delusional. If you thought they was leaving who they put at 4 out after
let's talk about it.
3, you're delusional.
Alabama gets 4. That's when the bomb dropped. That's when
it all happened because
that's when shit went crazy. So Alabama, they revealed at 4. Now Florida State knows, they're not in.
You got to feel bad for that reaction, right? Like you saw they had the cameras on Mike.
I felt bad for Michigan. They seemed really upset about it. I'm just saying.
Hey, that was there were 2 things.
They was so upset
that looked pretty crazy, and it was one Florida State, and that's where you felt bad for. And then you saw Michigan, and you saw a team that was like, "Damn, we thought we was just gonna walk into this national championship." They woke up that day thinking they was matching up against Florida State and walking into the national.
Yeah, they was penciling in January.
You could tell by their reaction that they were okay. We're gonna beat Florida State with a backup quarterback. Not mad at Michigan for thinking that. If we were Ohio State and we were number 1 and we thought we was going to match up against Florida State, I would have thought the same thing.
100%.
You penciled us into the national championship. Great. Let's see the matchup.
So everybody knows me and Mo are going to do a full preview of these games and some of the other bowl games in a week or 2. So we're not going to dig too much into the matchup. So just overall, I'll just ask you this and then we'll go on to the Florida State thing. Did you think Alabama deserved to get in? And we're going to blend this right into the Florida State conversation.
Yes, I do. They did deserve to get in. The only difference between this year and almost any other year is there was literally 5 teams that all deserved to get in.
There was good teams.
Somebody was going to have to get. We knew when Saturday night ended, when Florida State won, there were 5, really 6.
6, really.
But there was all different ways people were going to get screwed. Because you could have said we're going to screw Florida State and we're going to screw Bama and we're going to put Georgia in there. But you can't do that right after Georgia just lost to Alabama. Had they lost in week 3, you might could justify it because they were thinking about doing it with Texas. But there were so many scenarios. There were 5 to 6 teams that literally deserved to get in the playoffs. Really, all top 8 outside of Oregon once they lost. You could have made a case for Ohio State as well. So there were 7 teams that deserved to get in. I feel like if Ohio State not getting in, they didn't feel screwed. They were just like, hey, we dropped the ball. It's on us. We didn't beat Michigan. That's cool. But Georgia, Florida State, and Bama all deserved an argument for that 4th spot. 2 of those teams were going to get screwed. And guess what? You knew one of them wasn't going to be – the 2 teams that got screwed was not going to be both SEC teams. You knew that. You knew it.
So I'll just ask you the question that's on the screen, right? Did FSU actually get screwed? And when I ask you the question, I don't mean like, because you just said that you think Alabama deserves to be in. We all know it's because of Jordan Travis. Like, and that's fair. Like, that is a fair thing because as a viewer, I had nothing against Florida State. I feel terrible for them. Everything they say about getting screwed is true. Like I do understand where they're coming from, but as a viewer of the playoffs, I'm like, man, I don't feel comfortable with their backup quarterbacks enough to get in. Their argument about you should give us a shot, 100%. I wish I could see. I hope Florida State and Georgia play on the up and up, and it's a real game, and I get to see. And I do feel bad, but the other side of it is I think they got the fourth team right. Now, the really getting screwed part is, do you think it was outside factors as far as the ESPN SEC thing, any of the Nick Saban stuff? Do you believe anything factored in beyond we think Alabama's a better team?
Everything. I think everything was factored in. I think knowing that you couldn't have a playoff without an SEC team.
Right. I'm going to ask you this real quick. I hate to keep interrupting you. Just real quick on the SEC. Like, is that a fair argument, though? I mean, do you think – I think the SEC's done enough over 15 years now to buy a little bit of slack, no matter how you feel about them, no matter, like, you know, the talking heads and all that. I feel that, like, it would have been shitty not to give SEC a chance, because my argument always is, I don't care how bad you think the SEC teams are, they still have NFL players on the field. They're still physical. You still risk injury. You're still getting banged up, as opposed to we just talked. If anything, if you told me Georgia got in over Michigan, I would feel less bad about it, because I see what they do every week. If you watch the games and play these physical games, like, I'm sorry, but going into Florida and winning the game, everybody keeps talking about how easy that is. It's still playing great athletes in a tough environment, whether it's tough or not, just like Florida State did.
Yeah, playing at the Swamp is never easy, especially, like, you know, it's like playing Florida at the Swamp is like, it's the same pitch as people tell you in the Big Ten, like going to Wisconsin and playing on the road against Wisconsin. Like, they may not be
which Michigan didn't do, by the way. I just want to be clear when we're discussing resumes.
Yeah, and that's not easy. Like, going into Wisconsin we know that environment, especially being Big Ten guys, being Ohio State guys, like, that's not an easy game, especially on the road. Like, playing Wisconsin in Wisconsin is never easy. They do the jump around thing. They have a tradition. Their crowd is intense. But no, I do think the SEC has bought their, and I don't mean bought like with money, but I think they bought the benefit of the doubt. Georgia's won back-to-back. Alabama's won multiple national championships. They've been to multiple national championships. And in the playoff era, forget the BCS. Let's talk about since 2014.
Yeah.
Alabama has been there multiple times. They've won multiple times. Georgia's coming off a back-to-back, was looking to try and win 3 in a row. LSU has won one in that time span. Like, and they've always had somebody representing them, and they've never had to do it in a way that the SEC has never represented the playoffs in a way that we've never seen before. It'd be different if Bama had 2 losses and beat Georgia.
Like last year would have been a
different conversation. Yes, it would have been different. Had LSU won last year and beat Georgia, and they were a 10-2 LSU, but had won, and there were 1-loss teams or undefeated teams, and you screw them out, that's different. But a 1-loss SEC Alabama, whose 1 loss is to also the number 3 team in the country that made the playoffs. Your 1 loss is against number 3. Your best win is against number 1. You have the resume, and I'm sorry, and I know this will probably get into it, and maybe you didn't plan on getting into it. This is why the reports came out yesterday. People will be surprised if FSU is in the ACC next month. They plan on coming to the Big Ten. They think they'll be in the Big Ten in the next month. You know why? Because they just got screwed. And guess who they got screwed by? Your typical teams that should be pretty decent. None of your brands were good. Miami, what were they known for this year? Screwing over an overtime game. Clemson was absolutely terrible. Like, they were a bad team. And Florida State.
Clemson
screwed them this year.
The Clemson fallback killed Florida State. Like, it absolutely killed them.
Clemson was just Notre Dame. Think about if Clemson was a 3-loss team like Notre Dame. And I think Clemson finished with like 4 or 5 losses this year. They were like 7-5. Imagine they finished 3 losses. I think you get more of a benefit of the doubt that beating Clemson actually mattered. But they were a 5-loss team at the end of the day. That's like telling me Oregon beating USC mattered earlier in the season. It didn't matter. USC lost 5 games. Who cares? That's not an impressive win. So now the only win that you hang on to is a 3-loss LSU that you beat at the beginning of the season, and you're also now in your predicament with a backup quarterback. They think, and I would have think, if LSU played Florida State today, I would have took LSU.
Absolutely.
With the quarterback situation, I'd say LSU would beat them today. So I don't even think you're better than your best win. It didn't age well for you. You had a lot of struggles, and you don't have that signature win later on in the season. You did not get an opportunity to play literally anybody, where, like, when we questioned Georgia all year, the Kentucky game was like, hey, this is a trap game. They go and beat the doors off of Kentucky.
Yeah.
Then they get Missouri, who they struggle with, but they win. And they get Missouri and Ole Miss back to back. And the Ole Miss game was hey, we're going to pound Ole Miss. And that's exactly
my whole. So I know as much as people hate the SEC and stuff, but the truth is playing those games back to back is rough. Again, we're talking big time talent. We're talking physicality. Even when you win a game by we'll say Alabama, what they did to Tennessee in the second half this year, like that game was close. Alabama took it away in the second half. They're still playing against athletes and guys that can tackle, guys that beat you up. Like that's the whole thing about the attrition of the SEC. That is a real thing. I understand. Now I do agree. There's two things here. They're on opposite sides of this. One thing I totally agree with ESPN being in bed, basically owning the SEC rights and all that, and also owning the playoffs. That is a huge conflict of interest. It definitely factors in because these guys in the boardroom, they know the TV ratings, and that's what they make money off of. And I think it's silly. Like, if anybody doesn't know, the playoffs are not an NCAA sport. It is a TV playoffs. Like, the ESPN owns it. That's who pays the money for it. It's all TV rights that got us a playoff. So anybody like me or Mo that wanted these playoffs for all these years and we finally got it, it's TV money that got us playoffs. So you can't also ask the TV money to overlook, they're not going to sacrifice ratings. Like, that is a real thing. And I can't even say that it's a bad thing because bowls do the same thing. If you think Ohio State's not in the Cotton Bowl because they know that everybody's going to watch the Cotton Bowl, you're crazy. Like, they ain't show, the TV ratings ain't coming from Missouri. No offense, Missouri. You got a great team. We'll talk about it later, what we think's going to happen. But I'm saying, it still comes down to TV rights. And
you didn't put Ohio State in Dallas in Jerry's world for any other reason other than Jerry finna make some money off Ohio State and Dallas. And
playoffs are the same thing. I understand. And next year, I do think it's a little better because there's more opportunities. Florida State would have got a shot. And now the other side that I'm going to say, all those X factors were true. Like, Florida State in that sense got screwed. I totally agree. What I don't like is we just said it about Washington. Washington, you're going to get thumped. No, we're going to show up and kick, Oregon's teeth in. Great. You did your job. Alabama, you play Georgia. You're, whatever. You're I think maybe a 5-point underdog when it started. Nope. You're going to look good. You're going to look physical. Your first-year quarterback showed up and single-handedly beat Georgia. Okay, you did your part. FSU, you played Louisville, you stumbled through it, your defense showed up, and you won an ugly game. That is just you could have done your part, FSU. You could have done your part. If you beat them, if it's 21-3, I think you're in the playoffs right now. I think you have a shot at making playoffs, but you stumbled through it. There's no way that you can, you put that product on the field when the quarterback that's going to start the game didn't even play, if it's a playoff game, or he may not be able to because of concussion protocol. You're asking a lot from the committee to say, now we're going to give you a shot, because if it goes wrong, they're going to get blasted. And then it undermines your whole playoffs. And you're going to have Alabama, Georgia, or maybe Texas. You have these teams watching Florida State get crumbled after they, went through these seasons. It was never going to happen. So that's what I'll say about Florida State. The only argument I'd say against you guys, great season. It sucks. But you could have gave yourself an argument like Ohio State. If y'all want to say Ohio State, Cardale Jones, fine. If you beat Louisville 59-0, you're in the playoffs right now. So that's what I would tell you about Cardale Jones.
Especially if they would have did it. The difference between how Ohio State did it and how how Florida State would have been able to do it is the fact that they would have won 59-0 with their third string quarterback, and the guy that's deemed better would have been playing in the playoffs. You won 59-0 with your third string, where Ohio State won 59-0, but you still had to factor you were putting this team in the playoffs with this guy at quarterback. There was no we were getting JT Barrett back. So it's okay, they won that way, and they get their better quarterback back come this playoffs. Oh, they're easily in, because if they're doing this, we think they're a better team with this guy. Yeah. You didn't even, if you would have done that with the third, you would have got the benefit of the doubt, because you're the better guy, the true backup would be playing in this game. And so now, even still, I feel like the pressure for Florida State playing Georgia, I don't think it's fair, for the simple fact, I don't think a lot of players are playing in this game.
Yeah, that game.
Getting Jordan Travis, I don't think, I think multiple receivers. I don't know if Keon Coleman and them, because now you're asking them to take what we have now deemed New Year's Six meaningless bowl games that the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s and Keon Coleman's don't play, and them to make a statement. Now we got to make a statement in a game that I might not even have my best player. I already don't have my quarterback. I might not even have my next 5 best players on this field to make a statement. And so now if I get blown out, everybody, the casual who don't fully understand
everything's going to be
and just see Florida State and Georgia be like, oh, see, this is why. And you're like, yeah, well, Keon Coleman not playing. He going to the NFL. Johnny Wilson already declared for the draft. So like these guys aren't going to play in this game. Yeah. So we never even get, that's why I'm glad for the 12-team playoff, because we never even get the opportunity to really see these teams who feel shafted go get revenge, because you can't, you're not even going to line up your best team.
You don't even care. I totally agree.
Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. You're playing for nothing except for bragging rights, but you don't get to brag about anything. Oh, we beat Georgia. They're probably going to, they probably got 5 NFL starters right now on that roster that's not playing in the bowl game.
Yeah. So that's the final thing about FSU, and I'm moving on for the rest of the year. I feel it boils down to this. I feel terrible for y'all, but it happens every year. Like it's happened to my team, Ohio State. They've been left in 2015. Don't tell me Ohio State didn't deserve a shot at the playoff. Guess what? They didn't take care of business. They didn't get it. It sucks.
2018. When we played in the Rose Bowl with Dwayne Haskins as one lost Big Ten champ.
Yeah, that was a bad. I feel bad for y'all, but when it just, and I know you won the games, but I also don't want to hear this like games don't matter. Yeah, they mattered a lot. We watched Alabama, Georgia. That game mattered. Like our eyeballs told us that game mattered. So I think that the 4 that's in is good. That's what I'll say. I don't know if it's perfect. I like the 4 that's in.
I think it's perfect. I think
we'll give your gut reaction, then we're going to move on to your subject, Mo. Just real quick, when you see the 4, who's your favorite
to win it all?
Yeah, like who's the best? I'll just say this: who's the best team out of the 4? I'm not even asking who's going to win it all, because you're going to have. I know you're going to analyze it. You're going to have good reasons. Who do you think's the best team in the 4? If let's say they all play each other in like a round robin, who would you have coming out of that? Because then later on we'll do our preview and then we'll get
Alabama.
down to it. You think Alabama's
I think they've impressed me. Yeah, I think it's Alabama. Just the fact of just watching them do what they just did, beating Georgia. To me, it was a statement. We counted them out after losing to Texas. I mean, we heard it all. Saban should retire. Yeah. The run is done. And now, like, he's back as a, 11-1. Well, now what, 12-1 SEC champ. And you put them at the 4 seed, and they're underdogs against Michigan. Yeah. Oh my God! Let's just hand Bama in for the national championship.
The last thing I'll say is I think I agree with Mo. I like all these teams. I think all of them at their best. What I like about Texas and Bama that they've done is their lines, defense and offensive, have gotten better. I understand what Michigan's got. Again, we just haven't really got to see Michigan open it up. They'll probably have a whole new playbook for the playoffs. There's more there underneath the surface. They did, but again, my whole point is they didn't have to use any of it against Iowa. So I'm sorry, like I'm just going to take you at your word that you can play better. We're going to find out. Here's what I'll say: the last thing on Michigan is that they get their chance. They get the legend. They get the big boys on the block. They can shut everybody up and win this game, and then the whole Big Ten versus SEC, all the bullshit will go away. They can. All the chirping, everybody counting them out, even though they're the 1 seed, all that. Just win. That's all I'm saying. Just win. All right. And then, so that was cool. Like, again, everybody, we'll have a preview coming up here in a couple weeks, more extensive. We'll get into each game and some more thoughts on that. So now this week's also been crazy. After the playoff rankings were released, I believe it was the next morning at 7 a.m., transfer portal opens. It's open till, I believe, January 3rd. And that's for everybody. Like if anybody saw the transfer before that, you had to be a grad transfer before that to enter the portal. This is the open portal where any player can go, and it goes from the day after the playoff, the Final Four rankings until I think right after the bowl games, whatever that. It's like January 3rd, I believe. And so, to start it off, me and Mo are Ohio State fans. 7 a.m. Monday morning, our starting quarterback, 11-1 quarterback for Ohio State this past season, Kyle McCord, enters the portal. That experiment's done. And then things kind of got crazy from there. So Mo, you want to talk about some of this? Like, how was you feeling Monday morning at 7:30 when you found this out?
Oh man, I called my dad and I was like, no, actually, yeah, I called my dad. He wasn't here yet. I think it's soft. Like, I don't think the transfer portal's soft. First off, hold on. We're only
specific. It's your word.
One person. I think Kyle McCord transferring, I thought was soft. That was my initial reaction. I saw that he transferred, and I'm like, what's crazy? You know who transferred before Kyle McCord did, though? that I'm starting to see why these guys are transferred. Our kicker transferred before Kyle McCord did. Now,
I missed that.
This is what happened with our kicker the past 2 years. The clock strikes midnight. He misses the field goal for an opportunity to win the national championship. Then in Michigan, I know it was an outside shot of asking him to kick a 51-yarder, but a lot of things go down to everything within that play call of Ryan Day letting the clock go down or whatever. He misses it at the end of the day. Sounds to me like the guys kind of got ran off campus. I mean, your recruiting class absolutely like accomplished nothing. You walked on the campus and you've done nothing. You haven't beat Michigan. You haven't won a Big Ten championship, and you haven't won a playoff game. There's no type of success from that recruiting class that includes Marvin Harrison Jr. As great as he's been, you will be. That's why, and I don't think he's really coming back. I just want to throw this out. That's even why he's contemplating, why it's even a slight thought in the back of his head. Even if he doesn't come back, which I don't think he does, the slight thought is he knows that recruiting class has done absolutely nothing, and he knows everybody loves him. Everybody knows he's one of the best receivers to walk through that door, but he's never going to get the love because he walks away and we're like, as great as you are, but you never beat Michigan, you never won a Big Ten championship, you never won a national championship, or even won a playoff game to play in the national championship. So I think Kyle McCord transferring is kind of soft. My thing is we haven't grabbed a transfer quarterback yet. And two, like there's another window after spring practice.
There is another window, yes.
And so I think for that
but this is the big one as far as getting your quarterback.
It is, but at the same time, like you had an opportunity to be like, you know what? This season was a failure. I didn't hold up my end of the bargain. Maybe I hang it on my hat, but you're thinking about bringing in somebody that you think could be better than me and take you to the promised land. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stay. And if anything, I'm going to compete. And I'm going to show you I should be the starting quarterback. And if I don't, then I will take the second opportunity window because guess what? Those schools that Kyle McCord's getting looked at, they still going to want him.
They're going to need a quarterback.
They still going to want him after spring. Like he's not such a superstar that like, oh, he needs to find his way to Oregon or whatever. So he could have competed and then lost and it would have been respected. Like Kyle McCord, you stayed, you fought, you lost. Guess what? You're entering your senior year. Bro, I ain't mad at you for transferring. But like leaving out the fact of possible competition, you don't even know who we're bringing in. We haven't brought in anybody yet. You jumped ahead of it, and I get it. But like no matter what, you're still going to end up at Nebraska or Rutgers or Miami or Pitt, no matter whether you left now or whether you stayed to compete and left in the springtime. So like you ran away from competition, which is the problem with a lot of people their age nowadays. That's the problem with that. They all run from competition instead of be like, you know what? I have a second opportunity to transfer if I don't win out this quarterback competition. But hey, if you don't want to be a Buckeye though, at the same time, go ahead and
That's what I think it boils down to.
I don't want you if you don't want to be here.
I think there's a lot of factors included. I know for a fact that Harrison leaving, that affects him. They're lifetime teammates or whatever. I know for a fact that, I'm sure that Day was clear on, listen, son, I make $11 million a year. Like I ain't risking it all for you, who's not going to be here, but maybe another year. So just so you know, like you're not guaranteed a spot.
Yeah, they said he had a sit down the day before he transferred. They said him and Ryan Day apparently had a sit down. And so, because I just want to touch on
credit to Ryan Day for doing this, by the way, as hard as I am on him.
Ryan Day about his press conference, because basically people didn't know, and nobody really knew until after the fact. People thought this was the first time Ryan Day was letting it be known that I'm not committing to any quarterback on this roster right now, and it's going to be an open competition, and we plan on bringing people in. People thought that was the first time that was being said, so it's like, damn, that's messed up. Kyle McCord goes 11-1, an opportunity to beat Michigan, and that's how you let him know. The day before, he had that press conference on Monday or Tuesday. He had a sit down with Kyle McCord that weekend, that Saturday, and had already talked to him one-on-one, man-to-man, and let him know. So I'm not mad at Ryan Day. You still got a responsibility. You make $11 million. The press wants to know, hey, are you going with Kyle McCord forward? Your season's over. You're not answering playoff questions. You're not even answering Cotton Bowl questions. You're answering questions for next year. The Ohio State media, the media for college football, they have moved on with certain teams.
Yeah, I can assure you here in Ohio, we have absolutely moved on to 2024. Yeah, it's like 100%. It was
your Ohio State or Bama or Georgia or whatever. Like Georgia's on to next year. Georgia's on to figure out whether Carson Beck's coming
all
back.
All but 4 teams. All but 4. Well, no, you know what? I think like there are some teams we'll talk about in our bowl preview.
There's some, but not the Ohio State.
From my perspective, the energy, Day did what he had to do for the program right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever. I can tell you the energy Monday morning of just knowing that we're moving on. As bad as like it sucks for McCord, he laid it out there. Total thanks to the season. Like he had a really good season. It doesn't matter. He's gone now, so there's no reason to break down the pluses and minuses. Good season, great Notre Dame game. He'll always have that Notre Dame victory. Just like Trainum entered the portal too. Both those guys like have a legendary moment at Ohio State. But what I like is what Day couldn't do is roll in to the offseason being like, nah, we're going to ride this out, because that's going to cost him a job. Like, you couldn't do that. No, you go get one of these dudes. You got Aaron Nolan coming in. Like, you got the threat of that. Like, and what I will say is a lot of it's on the field too. Obviously, if you got guys like Nolan coming in, or your offense works best with the Justin Fields, McCord ain't your dude. Like, you did the best you could with it, but like he's 50% of the quarterback that Ryan Day needs. And I think that's the biggest factor, is that the writing's on the wall. Like, when half your playbook doesn't work because your quarterback's not that type of athlete, that kills you. And I think that was, honestly, I think the overall factor actually was on the field stuff. I know McCord, he's going to be fine. He's probably, my guess is he goes to the East Coast. He's going to get a pretty good NIL. He's going to be decent. I really do hope everything goes well for him, because the guy
is going to be good enough. Pretty good. Him being pretty good is going to be good enough for a lot of schools that are looking at getting.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, since we're talking transfer portal, breaking news while we were talking, Dillon Gabriel's going to Oregon.
Dillon Gabriel, Big Ten is going to be fire next year.
Yeah, so
I got a hot take.
Thing.
We're going to share it later. I'm not going to do it today in the show because we're about to wrap it up. My hot take for the year is Big Ten is going to actually top to bottom be better finally than the SEC next year. That's not coming from a Big Ten homer. That's saying, as I know it took 2 conferences to get better than one. Doesn't matter. Oregon's going to have a quarterback. Ohio State's going to have a quarterback. Michigan's going to be tough. I don't know what's going to be like. We don't know if they're going to get whatever. They're going to be good. They're going to be good. Washington, with that coach and stuff, they're going to replace Penix.
USC's going to figure it out. Like,
my hot take for the offseason. My hot take for the offseason, we'll talk about here in a couple of weeks, is that the Big Ten is actually going to be the better, even though there's only 2 conferences left. It's fucking weird, but
what's crazy? Just to hit on that, I just want to say the Big Ten will be what the Pac-12 was this past year. You remember 5 weeks in?
Yeah,
we were talking about how loaded the Pac-12 was, especially at quarterback. Like, when you looked and you're like, yo, the Pac-12 has arguably 6 to 7 of the best 8 or 9 quarterbacks in the country in one, literally in one conference. I think that'll turn out to be the Big Ten, because USC's always, Lincoln Riley going to have one. He going to
be filthy next year.
State going to have one. Michigan's looking to replace. They might end up getting in the transfer portal. Speaking of transfer portal, they might get the guy that they should have got, that should have been sitting behind J.J. McCarthy and Dante Moore in the first place. Washington's going to figure it out. They're going to get a transfer guy or something.
I think we might.
So
one last shot at that team. I'm not sure that he should have been sitting behind McCarthy. That's all I'm going to say. Let's a little playoff preview. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but at the same time, like,
we're going to find out January.
He knew he was going to be sitting behind McCarthy.
January 1st, we're going to know a lot. We're going to know a lot.
Kelly to try and get his NFL stock up, and now he still may end up back at Michigan. He's
looks like it.
Detroit guy, so it will make a lot of sense. It will make sense for Michigan to replace J.J. McCarthy with a guy that's literally the next up and coming of, like, Jesus, in a sense. Like, he was a 5-star athlete coming out, so like it's a solid replacement.
Big Ten, it's going to be crazy next year. A lot of good teams. So, Mo, I want to thank you for coming on this awesome show. Thanks for riding this out with me. It's a lot of fun. And coming up soon, everybody, keep in touch with Jeff Needs Sports at JHunt006 on Twitter. Keep in touch with Mo Murphy, Up in Flames. I believe it's you'll find you search Mo Murphy on Twitter. I mean, it's Mo Cheese, right?
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter, and keep up with the Off-Ball Network. Again, it college football, pro football, basketball. Oh, and shout out real quick. The game will already have happened afterwards, but the Columbus Crew plays at home against LA in the MLS Cup final Saturday afternoon. So shout out to all my homies out there. Huge. They love soccer here in the state of Ohio. They love that team. I'm really, really rooting for them.
I didn't know that.
to win another championship. Yeah, they're playing for the championship again this year. It'll be their third or fourth one they're going for. LA won it last year, so that's a big deal here in Ohio. So shout out to all my Crew fans out there. Shout out to everybody who listens to the show. Shout out to everybody who interacts with me in the streets, on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks. The comeback is going well so far, Mo, and you're a big part of it, man. I thank you so much.
Oh yeah, of course. I always love coming on. So
all right, peace everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.